Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear sisters, welcome back to my channel. I didn't post much in Ramadan because life was really busy, but alhamdulillah, we're back now with the regularly scheduled programming. And here on this channel, we talk about raising Muslim kids and building healthy Muslim families. My name is Salma. I'm a mom of 6. We're homeschoolers. I'm a former midwife and currently a parenting coach. I run a virtual online support community for Muslim moms called Mommy Mondays. Every Monday we get together and we have live Zoom calls and we discuss all kinds of issues, whatever comes up in our daily lives as Muslim mothers, right? And so today I wanted to share the top themes that have emerged as sort of main issues Muslim mothers are facing and the top 10 questions that keep popping up in our community. I figured this will give you a little bit of a sneak peek into what our community is like and what kind of issues we're discussing, but also it will address the wider issues that Muslim women in the community are facing. And so I'm hoping this will be relatable because this is something that I've seen years and years through my work for years and years in the Muslim community, and this is kind of always the same issues that are popping up, and so I think we need a long-term and lasting solutions, inshallah. Okay, so the top 3 things, and I printed this out by the way, just so I can keep it focused, and it's the data from our community. The top 3 themes that have emerged is how to achieve balance between being a mom and being a wife. So how to balance marriage and motherhood, this is a big one. How to handle issues related to our marriages that are affecting how we show up as mothers in our daily lives. The second topic that comes up is how to prioritize your faith. How do we prioritize our Islam while we're going through all these issues, of raising our kids and trying to teach them the deen? How do we not forget ourselves? Like when we're making sure the kids are praying, the kids are reading the Quran, what happens to our faith and our worship? And particularly as we had Ramadan passing us now, how mothers were coping in Ramadan, what were the strategies we were employing, how could we get the best out of Ramadan without burning ourselves out and without feeling guilty for things we couldn't do now in this new phase of life, right? So the second topic is how to prioritize your faith in this stage of life as a mom, and particularly mom of young kids. And the third topic was time management that kept coming up, time management and setting boundaries, right? Basically energy management, like, where's our energy going? Who is taking our energy? Where are we giving our energy willingly? How to set boundaries, where we can't give the energy, right? And how to prioritize who to give our energy first, right? Because motherhood is so self-sacrificing, right? We're constantly surrounded by little humans who really need us, and also our husbands and our wider families and society and community. So how to balance our time in a way that's productive, and how to set boundaries, how to set healthy boundaries so we can show up in those areas where we're required to show up. So those are kind of the 3 things that keep coming up: balance between marriage and motherhood, prioritizing our faith, and the third one, energy, time management, and also how to set boundaries, right? So I'll go through like top 10 questions that keep coming up, and I kind of batched them together so you can kind of see what Muslim mothers are facing. The first one is, that keeps coming up is how to balance our roles as a mother and a wife without feeling guilty, and how to take care of ourselves, in this journey without feeling guilty. There's a lot of guilt for taking time for yourself because we're constantly told that, we have to be there for our kids, we have to be there for our husbands, and so a lot of mothers are neglecting themselves in the process, or even when they know they should be taking care of themselves, they feel a lot of guilt for taking the time out, for asking for a break, asking their husbands to step in, asking for help from their relatives. There's a lot of guilt associated with that. So we kind of had to work on that mindset of that it's not wrong to ask for help, that it's not wrong to take a break. It doesn't make you a selfish mom if you need some time off, if you need to take care of yourself, because you cannot pour into other people's cups if your own cup is empty, right? Eventually it will catch up with you. You might start off energetic as a new bride or as a new mom, but as time goes by, the burnout is real, right? And that's something that keeps coming up, the burnout, and the moms just feeling overwhelmed and not being able to keep up. So the first step we kind of usually discuss is that idea that taking care of yourself is not wrong or not selfish, and that you don't have to feel guilty about it, right? So that's a common theme that comes up, how to balance it and without feeling guilty and without feeling burnt out, right? The second question that comes up is how to keep up your own spiritual practices, particularly during Ramadan, or particularly during times that are, Islamically important. But as a mom, it kind of falls back, like, we cannot attend the masjid maybe as we used to, we cannot read as much Quran as we used to, we cannot fast maybe as we used to, right? And so how a lot of women feel like the Ramadan's passing by, or they feel like spiritually neglected in that sense. So how can we, what are the strategies as Muslim moms we can employ to feel spiritually connected, right? And again, dua is a big one, asking Allah to guide us, asking Allah to give us the patience, to give us the mindset that this is not wrong, that taking care of our families is also worship, right? And so that's another one that comes up. There's a lot of questions that come up in terms of issues with husbands, right? Like, what if the husband is not leading spiritually, right? What if he's not the one waking up the family for Fajr? What if he's not the one who is taking the kids to the masjid? What if he's not the one who is taking the leadership in terms of Quran recitation and Quran reading? And so a lot of practicing Muslim women, they expect the man to be the qawwam. They expect them to be leaders. And so when that doesn't happen in the family context, when the leadership is missing, it becomes very hard for mothers to do it all themselves, and they kind of lose respect, right? Or like, they expect the husband to lead, and then they become the nagging ones, who are reminding the husbands, and that kind of shifts the dynamic in the marriage. Like, she doesn't want to be his mom, right? And so a lot of it's like, how to deal with that frustration when the husband's not leading. And we talk a lot about strategies then, to focus on your own worship, to ask Allah for patience and kindness, and to, leave that room for the husband to step up spiritually rather than to nag him and make him feel like he's a kid. But rather, especially if you're raising kids, you don't want the husband to be one of the kids, right? And so a lot of moms are frustrated with that. And I don't know if this is relevant, to you guys who are watching this channel, but there is a lot of disconnect between male and female leadership styles in the family, right? And who is going to be the one who is setting the tone for the family. So it's much easier if men are the ones setting the tone. And again, we're not saying women have no authority in this sense, because yes, of course, they are the shepherds of their flock, but it becomes very discouraging when, sisters are continuously talking about their husbands not stepping up, right? And again, makes you wonder, how are we getting to these marriages in the first place? Like, were these things not discussed initially? But qadar Allah, if you've been tested with a situation like that, this is some of the things we discuss, in the group, how to deal with that frustration yourself, because you're the only one we can deal with, right? Like, we're not there to change the husband, but rather like, what are the coping mechanisms for women in these situations? How can they deal with the frustration? How can they strengthen the marriage when the husband isn't as religiously committed, right? How can they work on the marriage? How can they make it better? How can they show up in their role as wife when the husband maybe doesn't care about the same Islamic rulings, right? Like, and what are the strategies we can employ in that sense, right? Another question that comes up is how to maintain your energy and motivation as a mom to show up, because again, a lot of moms are just plain tired, right? And so particularly with Ramadan, this was, a big discussion because we had the meetings during Ramadan as well. How to maintain your energy if you're constantly tired, if you're waking up, how could you be the one who's consistently showing up, right? And again, has to do a lot with self-care, has to do a lot with your standards, and taking rest and taking short breaks, and again, making very small goals and celebrating that victory and that success, right? And just really a lot we talk about is a mindset shift. How can we approach all the spiritual practice now as mothers? Like, what is that going to look like? And we don't want our frustration to spill into the kids, right? And that's what often happens. And so that's why we're discussing strategies, how can we maintain our own energy? How can we maintain the motivation for us to read the Quran and not just be, hypocritical, and just not tell the kids to read the Quran and then we forget ourselves in the process, right? We discussed a lot how to best to structure our days to feel structurally spiritually and so again, I'm reading it here what's the best way to structure our days to feel productive spiritually? And so how to build routines, what are the ways we can build our morning routine? What are the ways we can build our evening routine? What kind of strategies we can employ in our day to feel like our days on track, how can we align? So we have sessions every Thursday, which we call the weekly review. And basically during the weekly review, we do journaling exercises together where we kind of look at the last week. What have we done? What was our productivity like? Who got our energy? And then we set to-do lists for the next week, right? And so that kind of keeps us accountable. And so we discuss this in a community setting, during live Zoom calls on just the kind of, how can we hack the system, so to speak, but in our favor, right, as mothers. Another one that keeps coming up is how do I avoid feeling like a failure when I can't keep up with everything? A lot of moms, and again, the guilt I mentioned previously, a lot of moms feel like they're failing. A lot of moms feel like they're chasing impossible goals, particularly the high-achieving moms, who want to do all the things, the moms who are reading all the books, the moms who attended the halakas, the moms who are listening to the podcast. They're feeling overwhelmed and they're feeling like they can't keep up. And so they're wondering what's wrong with me. And a lot of the discussion we have centers around like, hey, there's nothing wrong with you. We have a systemic injustice ongoing. A lot of moms are doing this by themselves. A lot of them don't have a village. A lot of them have no help. We have moms in the community, who are pregnant and breastfeeding and have toddlers, and they have no family nearby. They don't have a Muslim community nearby. A lot of them don't have access to a masjid. So it's just really unfair to expect to be able to do it all by yourself, right? So a lot of guilt around, I'm feeling like I'm failing, I'm a failure. I can't do all these things that I set out to do. And a lot of times it's impossible goals as well. During the weekly reviews, we set some goals to do for next week, and then it turns out, well, it's impossible. I have young children, I need to take a look at where my time is going and just kind of set something more reasonable. Another one that comes up a lot is how do I encourage my kids to have a strong relationship with Allah without forcing it, right? So how do we pass on the faith to our children? What if the children are resistant? What if the children don't want to pray? What if the children don't want to read Quran? How can we create an atmosphere in our homes where children love the deen, right? And a lot of it's through modeling our love for Allah and through our worship. A lot of it's just encouraging gentle and positive experiences rather than yelling, using harsh punishments. A lot of it's creating family traditions where we go to the masjid together, where we read Quran together. And as you can see, this is all related to the previous questions as well, of energy and questions of leadership, right? Like, what if the husband is not supportive? What if I live in a joint family system where, others are not encouraging of that, where they're, preferring cultural values over Islamic values, right? So a lot of discussion centers like, well, what if my child doesn't want to pray? What if I'm scared that my child will grow up and not be practicing, right? And so how can we take that pressure off? And how can we introduce deen in a way that makes sense to our children, right? And so those are the things we discuss in the community. And I think this is something Muslim women are facing because there's a lot of pressure put on us to raise the Muslim children, to produce the next generation of Sahaba or scholars, right? And everybody's like, oh yeah, the mother is the foundation of that, of course, but we cannot do it all by ourselves, right? So those are the discussions that come up in the group a lot. How to make the most out of Ramadan. This was a big one because obviously we had sessions in Ramadan, and so this was something, and again, it's going to be coming up in other times of the year. How can we keep up our habits post Ramadan as mothers? And so as you can see, and again, I know I skipped some of the questions. I said I was going to do 10, but I'm just kind of looking at them right now, and a lot of them are kind of around the same theme. As you can see, the theme of balance, the theme of different roles as a mom and as a wife. How do I have time for that? And how do I have time for this? How do I not burn out in the process? How do I please all the other people around me? Issues with in-laws, issues with parents, issues with unannounced visits from neighbors, different community members, right? And so how do we set boundaries? How do we cope with that, right? So a lot what we discuss here are practical strategies. A lot of it's mindset shifts. How can we look at this in a different way? A lot of reframing, but a lot of it's also strategies on, how can we protect our time and energy. We're not wrong for wanting to protect our time and energy, right? We cannot just keep giving, and then there's nothing left. That's where the burnout happens, right? And so my experience in the community has been the Muslim women are from many different countries. And, it almost seems like there's no difference if the women are in the West or in the East. We have a international community, alhamdulillah, and most of the moms are facing similar issues, right? So I think it's a general problem that particularly practicing Muslim mothers are facing, because this is my audience, practicing Muslim mothers. We have very high standards. We are told, that the bar is really high in terms of like what we want to achieve. And then we're wondering what's wrong with us when it just becomes hard day to day, right? And this is the place I've been as a mom as well, wondering like, well, how come I can't do this? Like, if this is this noble thing, and if this is this khair thing that everybody's telling Muslim mothers to do, why am I having such a hard time? Thus concluding that the problem is with me, where rather it's a problem that's, systemic problem in our communities, that we don't have practicing fathers, sometimes practicing, husbands, that we don't have community support, that we don't have just the wider support network that's required to raise Muslim families, right? So in our community, we talk about, this approach from bottom up, right? How can we take care of ourselves first so we can show up, so we don't burn out? So when we want to pass on the faith, as sisters are concerned about, how do I pass on the faith to my kids? How do I teach them Quran without yelling, without, how do I make sure I stick to my hifz? How do I make sure, I'm not tired for all the things I said I'm going to do, and then repeatedly, week after week, I'm not showing up for it and I'm not doing it, right? So those are the kind of things that we're discussing in the community, and I'm sharing it here in the YouTube channel because I think a lot of you out there might relate to this, and I want to say that you're not alone, that it's not your fault, that you're not a failure, you're trying your best, and to include two things in your management of the situation. And so number one is dua, to ask Allah to help you, to ask Allah by using His names, and to ask Allah at times where du'as are being accepted, to that Allah be the one who guides you, that Allah be the one who gives you strength to continue and to find the right balance, and by tying your camel. So by action, by doing something actionable, right? By doing something every single day or every single week, something that's going to bring you closer to living your life according to your values. So as part of our community, we have two main things. We have Mommy Mondays, which is the discussion on Mondays, and then on Thursdays we have these weekly review sessions where we basically look at our time and energy, where is it going, and every week we set goals. What are we going to do next week to get closer to the version of us we want to be, right? And that sometimes includes just resting more, taking care of ourselves so we can show up, asking for help in the community, communicating with our husbands, telling them about our frustration, learning how to communicate without putting them down, without nagging, without without being annoying, but rather being true to our values. So doing this in an Islamic manner, but also without neglecting our needs. This is not a community, where we tell you just have sabr and that's the solution, but rather without neglecting yourself, showing you that you can still achieve your goals, achieve that balance without neglecting yourself, inshallah, right? So those are the kind of topics we talk about. Those are the issues Muslim women are facing, I think in our online community, but I think across the world, worldwide. So please let me know in the comments, which of these things are relatable to you, and what are the coping mechanisms you have found, all right? The doors to the community will open on April 13, inshallah, and I'll make another video, inshallah, next week, and so I'll see you then, okay? Take care. Assalamu alaikum.